Okay, so from the Lydian. So if I'm on the Lydian, let's pick a Lydian here, right here, and I go -1 backwards. Here we are. We're going from a Y to a P. So it's a YP modal range. And we're going to say that that's going to be a 4-3 modal range. I could go forward to the 3, meaning 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, or backwards 4 minus 1 to 3. That's going to be a -1 Y Lydian from the Lydian mode, negative first modal half step backwards, which you would think would be the -2nd scale degree, but we don't have the second over here. Notice here the M isn't giving us any information. Here, the Y is just telling us where we are measuring from. If you don't know that, you could just call it a -1 first modal half step backwards, right? You could just call it that if you don't know the name of the Lydian. But anyways, that's going to be the idea. Now, the inverse then would be 12 minus 1, which would be 11 node away from the Lydian 6 modal half step forward, which would be the 7th scale degree. So that means if I was on the Lydian, like over here, let's find a Lydian on this side, and I went 11 forward, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There we are there, and that would be 6 modal half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which would be the 7th scale degree if I made that the 1. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Okay, let's erase that. Erase that. All right. Erase that, please. I've had enough of that on there. Let's say we go to the next one, a -3. So if I go -3 back, then let's say we go from the Lydian -3. So let's say we pick out a Lydian here. Let's make this one 1, 2, 3. Lands us on the Dorian node. So I'm going to call it a YD range, even though we're going backwards, a YD modal range, which would be a 4-2 modal range. What's the distance? If I go counterclockwise, it would be a -3 from the Lydian mode, -2nd modal half step, which you would think would be the 3rd scale degree, but we don't have 3rd scale degrees, so normally I'd have to say -3, 12 minus 3 is 9, 9 is a major 6, therefore the major 6 could be going forward 9 or -3 back. But this makes more sense, because if I say it's a -3 from the Lydian mode, -2, that would be a positive 9 from the Lydian mode, and then 7 minus 2 would be 5 steps forward. So in other words, if I was on the Lydian mode over here, let's pick this one, and we can go forward 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Lands me on the Dorian, or I can go 5 steps forward, which is going to be 5 modal half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which you would think would be the 6th scale degree if I made that the 1. All right, let's just get rid of this one and this one. I'll try to keep these other two this time. All right, let's do the next one. So let's say we go up to the next one that's within a continent, we hit a continent with. So we're going to go a -5. So if I go -5, from the Lydian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can see it would be -1, 2, 3, the -3rd modal half step back, which would be the -4th scale degree if we had scale degrees, but we don't. So what do we have to do instead? We'd have to say, well, if it's -5 backwards, 12 minus 5 would be 7 forward, and just know that 7 forward means a perfect fifth, and therefore the perfect fifth could either be going forward 7 or back 5. It would make more sense, however, to call it something like a YI modal range or a 4-1 modal range. If I go negative in that, or counterclockwise, it would be a -5 from the Lydian mode, -3rd modal half step. And then if I go forward, it would be a 7 note forward from the Lydian node, 4th modal half step, which would be the 5th scale degree. So in other words, if I was on that Lydian and I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 going forward, or it would be 1, 2, 3, 4th modal half step, which would be the 5th scale degree, as we can see here. All right, let's go to the next one. So I'm going to undo this. Why isn't it clicking that? It's not switching. It's not switching like it's supposed to. Okay. So let's go to this one and say we go up to the next one and say, all right, we're on the YN. So this is the weird one. So that's going to be then if I go back 6. So if I go back 6 then from this Lydian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it brings me here, which is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4th modal half step, which would be the negative 6th scale degree. Negative 5th scale degree if we had scale degrees, but we don't. Instead, I'd have to say if it's a negative 5, 12 minus, negative 6, 12 minus 6 will be 6. So going forward or clockwise, it would be a 6 note away, diminished 5th or augmented 4th in our case here. And so we can then say that the other way would be 12 minus 6 would still be 6 and an either diminished 6 or an augmented 4th in this weird interval. But this makes more sense from the perspective of the Lydian because it's clear it would be a negative 6 from the Lydian, which would be a negative 4 modal half step backwards, and going the other way would be a positive 6 from the Lydian, and then 7 minus 4 would be a positive 3 modal half steps forward, which would be the 4th scale degree, which again it says 5 over here because that's from the perspective of normalcy or the Locrian mode. So that's that weird interval. So in other words, I could go forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Wait a second. Could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Or that would be 1, 2, 3, third modal half step forward, which would be the 4th scale degree. Okay, let's do the next one. That was a weird one. And so I'm going to do the next one. We're going to say we have, let's go to this one, let's just do it all the way up here. And so now we've got a 8 note away. So if it's 8 notes away from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 brings me here, which is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the negative 5th modal half step, which would be the negative 6th scale degree if we had that, but we don't. What do we do instead? Well, negative 8 minus 12 would be 3 forward, which would be 8, 4 forward, which would be a major third. Therefore, a major third could be 4 forward or 8 backwards. It would be better to say it would be a YA modal range, a 4-6 modal range. The distance, if I go counterclockwise, would be a negative 8 from the Lydian mode, negative 5th modal half step. And that the inverse then, or if I went clockwise, would be a 4 note away, Lydian, 7 minus 5, 2 modal half steps forward, which would be the 3rd scale degree. So if I was here, I could say we go forward 1, 2, 3, 4. And that would be, wait a sec, is that right? It would be 4 notes forward, and that would be 1, 2 modal half steps forward, which would be the 3rd, 1, 2, 3, if I make that the 1. All right, next one. It won't click that. It doesn't do it when I click on it. All right, I'm going to complain to the Microsofts because they listen to me. Everybody listens to me. All right. I'm going to go up. I'm going to change music theory and fix Microsoft at the same time. So here we go. So what if we go back 10? What if I go back 10? Then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 back. And that would be negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 6 modal half step, which would be the negative 7 scale degree if we had scale degrees, but we don't. What do we do? Negative 10 minus 12 would be 2 forward. 2 forward would be a major second. Therefore, the major second could be 2 forward or negative 10 backwards. Would be better to call it a YX modal range, a 4-5 modal range, or going counterclockwise, a negative 10 from the Lydian mode, which would be a negative 6 modal half step backwards, because the inverse would clearly then be 12 minus 10, 2 forward from the Lydian mode, 7 minus 6, 1 modal half step forward, which would be the 2nd scale degree. So if I'm here, I can then say, okay, it would be 2 steps forward, 1, 2 would be here, which would be 1 modal half step forward. All right, let's erase this. Eraser. All right. Next one. Let's bring it down and do the ones that land us in the ocean. The ones that land us in the ocean. The troublesome ones. So we don't want to do that because they people laugh at us when we play it, and it also makes us vulnerable to shark attack. But if we go back 2 steps, from the Lydian, what happens? We go back to, I'll tell you what happens. We land in the Dorian Ocean, because I'm going to name it by this side. It's the Dorian Ocean. All right. So we land in the ocean. So it would be, I would say that's -1.5 modal half steps back, which would be 2.5, you would think, scale degrees, but we don't have scale degrees. So we would typically say, well, if I go back 2, that would be like going forward 10. That would be a -7. Therefore, a -7 could be forward 10 or back 2. But I'd rather call it a YP negative modal range, or a 4 to a 2.5 modal range, which would be a -2 distance from the Lydian mode, or a -1.5 modal half step, which would be then going forward, would be like going forward 10 and forward 5.5 modal half steps, which you would think would be 6.5 scale degrees, but we of course have a 7 here because we don't have 0.5s because it's weird system. So we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, lands us in the Dorian Ocean, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5 modal half steps, which would be 6.5 scale degrees, which we don't have. We call it a -7. Okay, so let's close that out and let's do the next one. So now we're going to go up to this one. So -4 backwards. If we go -4 back, then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, lands us in the Ionian Ocean. So that would be -1, 2.5 modal half steps back. So what we normally would do is say, okay, it's back 4. So I'd have to say 12 minus 4 is 8. We know that 8 is a -6. Therefore, the -6 could be 8 forward or -4 backwards. But I'd rather call it a YD negative modal range, a 4 to a 1.5 modal range, which would be a -4 notes back from the Lydian mode, a -2.5 modal half steps back. Because then if I go forward, I know that that's simply going to be an 8 note away from the Lydian mode, 4.5